All right, we are live. And I'm with Katie Edge. She is with Renovation Sells San Antonio.
Okay.
And it's a really cool company. So I wanted to have a conversation with her today so we can find out a little bit more about what you do and how you got into it and how you work with realtors and home sellers. So I'm
Yeah,
going to go ahead and pass it over to you, Katie, to give us a quick intro.
I love it. So, yeah, I tell people that I help them to flip their own house. So, whenever you have a client who's going to get their house ready for sale, we do simple cosmetic improvements that can be done quickly, affordably, and give the client a good return on their own investment. So, kind of if your house was in maybe like a builder's grade or just look like a time capsule, we'll go in and give it a nice facelift to modernize it and make it neutral so that it can sell quick and for lots of money.
Awesome. What made you get into it? Why did you get into a business like that?
Well, it's always surprising because people are like, have you done this your whole life? And I have not. I actually worked in corporate America for about 17 and a half years and just kind of got tired of working for the man. And when you start thinking about it and you ask super wealthy people, what would you tell your former self? They all say get into real estate. But getting into real estate is quite a big leap. So we found this business idea, and it's such a simple but effective business. We've partnered with a third party lender who actually allows our clients to pay later. So I always tell people I'm like a one stop shop, right? Design it, construct it, and finance it so that you can pay no money out of pocket, put a little money in. So I say spend money to make money. And it helps the closing time on their house drastically reduce. So days on market for us is a fraction of what it would be if you just sold your house in its basic, we live in it kind of rundown condition, right?
Absolutely. That definitely makes sense as far as like just the quickness of getting it to sell. So just kind of touching on that, I wanted to see like what would you typically tell somebody like what their ROI like is there a
A
specific number?
formula.
Yeah, what does
Yeah,
that look
everybody always asks that. They're like, Katie, is there like a formula? So it's not necessarily a formula, but kind of is, right? So I'll ask the real estate agent, like, hey, looking at the comps, what do you see like the range and value is on the houses based on the condition of this specific property versus like the fancy schmancy houses in the neighborhood, right? And then also like what are the finish levels that you have on the fancy schmancy houses? Because one neighborhood in Castle Hills, maybe, older, it might be okay with like a level one granite and a 4-inch splash. And then if you go to like say Hill Country Village, you may need quartzite with OG edging and really fancy finishes from rejuvenation. So we want to make sure that the finishes that we put in the house are going to be reflective of the value. And then we can price out based on that range and comp. So I really do rely on my real estate agent partners to tell me what those numbers are so we can figure out how you can spend the money most wisely so that we get the highest return on the investment. And Tanya, not every property is going to make sense, right? Like if you have, let's say you were trying to sell your car and you hadn't done your oil changes and you hadn't rotated your tires and you had like saggy ceiling, coming from the roof, and you had all these things that were deferred maintenance. In a house, it's same, right? You have to keep up with certain things in your house. And sometimes if we have too much deferred maintenance, it takes us so much money just to get it to a level where it can sell that it may not make sense. And that house may be ripe for a real estate investor. So it's just really important to have realistic conversations with the agents and with the homeowners to see if it's a viable fit. And of course, no house is the same. So I really like to keep those lines of communication open. And I've told some homeowners before, this really isn't a smart model for you, but we have to look at those numbers and the condition of their house to figure out what can be. And usually I can make magic happen. So
I love that analogy. That's perfect.
yeah.
Because I even tell everybody you don't want to be the most expensive house in the neighborhood either. So that definitely fits in. And you even came to one of my listings and you were like, I wouldn't put any money into this.
That's right. Yeah, that was a great real estate investment special, So every property is different, but you got to do the things that make the most sense. And cosmetics, so just doing like I say a facelift, like Botox for your house, that's way cheaper than if I were to like demo everything, start from scratch, bring in new cabinets, all these things. But I can paint cabinets, throw some new countertops on it, maybe some new backsplash, not relocate my plumbing and electric. And I can do that for a reasonable fee versus if I were to do like a demo reno. So we make suggestions that make the most sense. I've even painted light fixtures before. That's like one of my favorite things. I actually have done it in a $5.5 million house. Paint does so much, girl. So much.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I like spray paint or like her
Yeah.
how?
Well, this particular one was a very fancy chandelier in an 18-foot, 2-story like living area, and it had little lamp shades on it. And then it had sort of short candelabra sticks. So we added some candelabra extenders, and then Antonio hand painted, could have had a beautiful brass edging on it with a beautiful detail. But he painted over the paint on the fixture that was like green, and it had some like fleur de lis. It was very specific. So we just kind of painted that part white, added those candelabra extenders, took off the lampshades, and we made this, thousands of dollar light shade look better for about $300.
Amazing. That's super impressive.
Yeah. Paint's
And
your
it
like number
probably
one
added
ally.
and it probably added like a huge return when at the end of the day too
Huge.
by doing
Yes,
that.
definitely.
Is there any other so as far as like the projects go, like what is typically or like what kind of projects do you do? Like from any landscaping to light
Everything.
fixtures?
So we try to do things that are light, fast, and easy, because if you're going to sell your house, you don't want me working on it for 2 months, given the right property, maybe something that's like, I'm looking at a house right now in Almas Park that's 6,000 square feet and it needs a lot of work. So that one may really run the like 6 to 8 week timeline. That is absolutely the exception. Typically we try to keep our projects from 1 to 3 weeks, and kitchens sell houses, and I can do a kitchen very, very quickly and very, very affordably. Bathrooms tend to be a little bit more expensive. We can, of course, do those as well. But if you got to retile a whole shower and maybe there's a bathtub and change plumbing, and like, it can start adding up quickly and it can add a lot of time. So I just try to help people make recommendations based on the specifics of their house. But I mean, we do everything. We'll do counters, we'll do tile, we'll do glass, we'll do electrical, we'll change out lights, we'll change plumbing fixtures, but things that really add a lot of pizzazz, with the goal being, if I can leave everything kind of right where it is, you're going to get the greatest ROI. Because if I got to scoot a toilet over, it's lots of money for a plumber. So if we can keep it in the same footprint, but just give it nice, fresh, modern updates, that's going to yield the highest return and make it really worth it for the client to invest.
Nice. That
Yeah.
is I love that answer because I was going to ask you like about a timeline, and the time is money, right? So we want to make sure that
Yeah, and time
you know
is money, and that's good that you mentioned that, because I've worked on projects before where they didn't do the work up front, and then the property sat on the market vacant sometimes for months and months and months. Time is money when you're paying a mortgage. So if they would have called me before, I could have ended up saving them money rather than just doing the right thing the first time. It makes a lot of sense to invest and to get those things done up front, rather than paying for a vacant property to sit and sit and sit and sit. Time is money.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of talking about calling before. When would you recommend like to have that initial conversation?
Ideally 6 to 8 weeks before, but I'm going to be real honest with you that most people are not that, like, they don't plan that far in advance. And so a lot of times just a phone call that is maybe, I've actually gotten a call, I want to say maybe a week is the soonest, maybe less than that, maybe 5 days. Hey, Katie, can you come look at this house? I go out and look at the house. I get an immediate bid for them. They pull the trigger quick. And I remember I did one where they called me on a Wednesday and we started on a Monday. Called me on a Wednesday, looked at the house on a Thursday, signed the contract on a Saturday, and I had crews there Monday morning. So sometimes, depending upon the season, that's not the case right now. Now it's busy, but depending upon the season, I can make things happen pretty quickly. And if I don't, y'all won't call me, Tanya. So I need to be fast,
Yes, absolutely. Because I mean, I've gone into listing appointments and sellers want to sell tomorrow. I'm like, well, there's a process that we have to
Yep.
follow here.
There's a process. That's right.
So you
Yeah.
have to kind of stick with that. And so you primarily work directly with realtors. You don't work with the home seller themselves, right?
Well, realtors are the ones who call me, right? Because you see the house and you're like, oh, I need to call Katie on this property. So, because homeowners don't really understand, like, you wouldn't think, oh, I'm going to spend money on my house before I sell it. No, you want to spend your money on the house that you're going to buy. Because if you're selling this house, you're going to buy another one. So people sometimes don't understand the value, but realtors see it, right? Because maybe I'm going to spend $25,000, but it's going to bring me an additional $75,000 in equity after I pay off the loan. So you're the ones that kind of see it and go, hey, I think I've got a contender for you. And then once we interact with the client, it's up to them to decide. And some people don't want to deal with it. Other people see the value, and I tell them, you got to spend money to make money. And so at that point, we would engage with the client and take care of the renovations directly with them. But my introduction and the reason my phone rings is from real estate agents who see the potential.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Yeah, because I was also going to ask if you work with investors or, people that are flipping. Like, is that a
Not usually. I do with some, but I will say most investors are cheap and they want to have the lowest possible investment in their house. And so you get what you pay for, because I have had investors who've called me after they went down the path. And actually, I'm quoting a client right now who hired a guy from Mexico, and he brought in all these tiles and things, and the craftsmanship was not there. And so now I'm having to go back in and clean up the mess that this guy left in his house so that he can get it the proper levels, because he's going to sell it for over $2 million. And it needs to be reflective of the finishes that the client who's going to buy that house is expecting. So you get what you pay for sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely true. And going into like paying for things, I know you mentioned briefly at the beginning that you have like a program, but is there a way for somebody to pay at closing if they needed to go that route?
Yeah, so it's not pay at close, but it's pay later. So we do work with a third-party lender, and the third-party lender typically has pretty high credit standards as a low-risk loan because it is for a home seller. This is not a loan that an investor can use. But because of that, it is an incredibly great program that if you qualify for, and what's great about it is if you don't qualify, maybe your spouse qualifies, maybe your daughter qualifies, maybe your mother, it could be your brother, your nephew, like your best friend, I don't care, but they have to qualify. That person is basically accepting the terms of a personal loan that's going to be payable directly to Renovation Sells, but it's no money out of pocket for 10 months. So you get 4 months to fund any renovations, and then you get an additional 6 months after that of no payments. It's a soft credit pull, so it doesn't impact, credit. So if that person is in the process of trying to get another house and they're getting pre-qualified, it won't impact their pre-qualification. So it's a really great program. But again, it is a third-party lender. And so it's connected through our website. They can apply online, but again, instant access to money and no payments for 10 months. So what that means for the client is you have plenty of time to get your house renovated, put on the market. It's going to sell faster because ours do. And then you take your proceeds at the closing table and you will go to repay your loan. So even though there's, no one's lending money for free, you can absolutely make a huge profit if you spend the money in the right way, which is what we help advise our clients to do.
Awesome. And what would like is there a typical amount of like value that you're working with? I know you mentioned a $2 million house, but like,
Yeah.
do you work with $300,000 houses? Or like, where's like
I do them all. So I would say, so like I'm working on one right now in East Houston that I think she's going to list for 235 after renovations. I want to say she bought it for like 130. That's an investor. So I don't always work with investors, but that is an investor. And then I've done upwards of a 5.5 million. That's the most expensive, most fancy schmancy I've done, but everything in between. And the finish levels definitely are going to be appropriate given the price point. So I always tell people, sometimes they think, like in your $300,000 house, I need white quartz. No, you don't. You need Dallas white granite. You need something that's like, and then they think, oh, I need these beautiful fixtures, or like, sometimes they'll really expensive tile. And I'm like, no. We're going to go to the like discount section for your house because you're going to sell it for $250 and it's going to look great. It's going to look nice, modern. But we just want to make sure that they don't over improve and that the finishes are really reflective of the property value. So that's our commitment, and our designer makes those selections and things that appeal to the masses, because even though you may not like white paint on your walls, at least you can visualize your own personalized taste if I give you a blank palette. And so that's what we try to do, because you can take your pool of buyers from here to here if we get too specific on color, theme, wrought iron. I saw a house recently that had like wrought iron everywhere, and then it had gems hanging from the chandeliers. And like, while these finishes may be very lovely, they're highly personalized. And so our goal is like depersonalization, make it neutral so that lots of people love it, and then somebody can buy it really quick and, move on with your life, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And that, uh, yeah, you want to apply to everybody for sure. And that makes me think, like, is there a particular project that gets more ROI than another? I think you mentioned earlier kitchens, but do
Yeah,
you see
kitchens,
it?
kitchens and paint neutralization are like my favorite strategy. You can also, I mean, sometimes we'll do flooring, like if maybe perhaps the owner had like, a pet or a child and they like trash some carpets. We try to minimize as much carpet in the main living areas as we can, but not always. I actually did one in Dominion that ended up having a $222,000 profit, and we left carpet in the living room, the dining room, but the walls were neutral painted downstairs. The kitchen was significantly improved. And we even left the bathroom super dated. But the finishes in the kitchen, the lighting changes, these were enough. And then we did refinish some hardwood floors, beautiful hardwood floors in Dominion. But those finishes were enough to help that house contract in 7 days. And then 222,000 in profit that would not have otherwise been realized had we not done the work in the kitchen.
Wow.
So you just got to pick the right strategy, and every house is different. Maybe your house that you're going to call me about next time, and maybe it's going to have like a banging kitchen, but the bathroom is like a hot mess. And so maybe on that house we focus there. But we try to look for the things that generate the most ROI, and that's kitchens, master baths, fixture upgrades, lighting upgrades, depending upon, how many we have. And then we do little tricks like maybe you had a couple of pendant lights and we can replace them with some inexpensive canned lights. Maybe you had some, we call them, well, I won't be inappropriate on our live video here, but like different like flush mount lights that look super like old school. We might replace those with like a modern halo LED, just things again that give it that modern neutral finish.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Neutral, I think, is the key, right?
You got it,
You don't
girl.
need to do anything crazy.
That's right.
Nice. And I know you mentioned the Dominion, but do you work outside of San Antonio at all, or is that where do
I'm
you?
like San Antonio and surrounding areas. So, we'll go to Dominion, or I say we'll go to Dominion. We'll go to Bernie. We'll go to Spring Branch. We'll go to New Braunfels, right? But like Houston is not going to be, because my crews are all based in San Antonio. So it's kind of like, where can you? I'm doing one right, or I'm doing a bid right now in Mico, Texas, which is kind of near Medina, Lake Medina. But greater San Antonio area is really kind of the key for me.
Perfect. That's good to know.
Yeah.
And then, so I wanted to switch over a little bit. How do you um, differentiate from the other competitors, like in the industry?
Well, it's interesting because there's not a whole lot of me out there. People who offer design, construction, financing, and a one-stop shop. There really aren't many of us. But for me, Renovation Sells, is locally owned by me, and so you get a very personalized experience. Me and my team, it's very consistent and repeatable. We use the same crews. We have the same level of quality. You could go to Lowe's, right? Maybe you're Home Depot and they could do some work for you, but you're going to get a different experience there because they're going to sub it out to different contractors. And so maybe one time a client has a great experience and another time, they don't. But having that designer, because typically designers are very, very expensive, but with our process, design is included every time. Now our designer isn't client facing, so you, Tanya, can't call him and say, Eric, what do you think about this light? What do you think about these sconces? Like that's not the way our process works. We're really a one-stop shop for people who are, willing to kind of make quick decisions and trust in the process because we're designing again, not for them, but for the next homeowner. So, but having a one-stop shop with all three, I'm kind of unique. So I like that.
I do too. Like that is something that sold me to work with you versus anybody else because one, you're available and it's easy to get in touch with you. And I just love your personality. Like you're super fun. Every time I see you out, and you're so knowledgeable. So,
I
yeah,
try to be a resource. That's really the goal for me is if I can be a resource for agents and for homeowners, regardless if you get the job or not. Because I told somebody last night, I was like, you don't need to do this on your house. You just need to like drop your price. But if I can be a resource and we do the right things, then business will come.
hmm absolutely. Yeah. And I think that the fact that you pick everything out, it just relieves so much stress from everybody else because I'm indecisive and I know like 90% of the sellers are when they're in that situation too. So you making the decisions is like gold.
Yep. That's the goal. Because it takes time and energy. People think, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to farm it out to the painter and to the countertop guy and to the backsplash guy. Now you can do that, but it takes time and it's logistics. And every time I have a homeowner that I quote and they're like, that's too much money, we're just going to do it on our own. And then I run into the real estate agent later and I'm like, hey, how'd that work out for you? And they're like, did you know that she still hadn't painted those walls? I'm like, yeah, I know. I know that's what they
Yep. Definitely heard those stories for
did.
sure.
Yeah.
So to finish everything up, I wanted to wrap it up with just a question about you is what is your favorite thing about your career and your business? What do you love about it?
I love being a resource for you guys. I love that I've built up a lot of really great relationships, and people trust me. And that is something that relationships are very, very important to me. Katie's very much a people person. And so it's not what you do, it's who you work with. And so I think that's the biggest joy I get out of anything I do, whether that's work or volunteering at my kids' school or what have you, but it's the people that you work with along the way.
100%. I definitely am with you on that. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this with you is so that I could at least get your information out there because you're a great person to work with and I want everybody to know about your service. So I'm going to put your information in the comments and then anything else like your website, let me know.
Yeah.
I want to make sure. Or do you have an Instagram? I don't even know if I've.
No, I'm old, so I don't really do the Instagram as much. I think I just hit that button on Facebook that, puts the stuff on Instagram. But officially, yes, I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. We have a ton of work up on our gallery. If you go onto our website, www.renovationsells.com, it's got all my contact information on there. But if ever there might potentially be an inquiry like, hey, Katie, I don't know about this, just shoot me an email, shoot me a text, and I'm more than happy to look at it. One of my favorite things I like to do is kind of give some ballpark estimates because sometimes, people think you can make magic happen for $5,000. You cannot. So I'm like, hey, give me pictures. I'll kind of give you an idea as to what I think you should do, what like a ballpark range might be, just to sort of level set and make sure that we're all on the same page. So I'm always happy to be a resource. So feel free to shoot me an email or a text and I can give you some ballpark ranges to get you going.
Thank you. That's perfect. Yeah, the ballpark thing is definitely important, I think, because the expectation needs to be set, and sometimes they're pretty, they have high expectations. So
this is true. Reality. We need a little reality sometimes.
Yes.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, Tanya.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. It was such a pleasure talking with you. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, girl. You too.
Thank you. Bye.